Hi there, this is Elise Bennin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. You know what I wonder? How will AI affect our content marketing, especially the newsletter? That's just one of the questions we answered in today's episode with one of my favorite and funniest guests, Michael Katz, whose business is writing newsletters for professional service providers. We talked about which skills creative solopreneurs will need to strengthen and what we will need to do and help our clients do as AI becomes more and more a part of our lives and our businesses. We also talked about the current state of the LinkedIn newsletter since our last episode 2 years ago already was devoted to it, how the LinkedIn newsletter compares to an email newsletter, and how Michael sees the future of newsletters and his own future too. We laughed a lot, as I always do with Michael, so listen and learn. Hello, Michael. Welcome back to the podcast.
Great to be back. Thank you.
You're welcome. And please introduce yourself.
I'm Michael Katz. My company is called Blue Penguin Development, and I am a marketing consultant, and I specialize in email newsletters.
And we're here today because someone was listening to our most recent episode, since you're a veteran. This was episode number 441. It was called Your Email Newsletter on LinkedIn, and it's from 2 years ago, 2022, March 2022. And someone said, he's such a funny guy. Would you bring him back and let's hear what he has to say now about LinkedIn newsletter? So that was the impetus for my invitation.
Excellent.
I guess let's start there. I always have lots of different questions in my mind, and it's the challenge is how to choose which one to start with. So Let's just start there. So your LinkedIn newsletter, actually tell me about your newsletter strategy, because I know you have the other newsletter. What is that called? How long have you been doing it? What's in it? And then how does that relate to your LinkedIn newsletter?
So the other meaning like the one I send out by email?
Right, the one I would call your email newsletter.
Yes. So my email newsletter, which is called the Likeable Expert Gazette, goes out every other Friday. And it goes out on email. For a long time, I used Constant Contact. I switched over to MailChimp maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, they're both good, but MailChimp I found a little better. But my strategy has always been, well, even to sort of step back from newsletters, you need to create content, original content, on a regular basis as someone selling a professional service. And partly it's because I can't sample you the way I could, a pair of sneakers or if I went to a restaurant or something. Like you have to sort of jump in when you hire a professional.
And trust.
Yeah, exactly. And trust. And there's a lot of trust involved because you really have to jump in with both feet. So when you create content, it gives people, it's like a free sample. They get a sense of how you think and who you are. And I also find that it helps you, if you publish a newsletter, it helps you stay in front of them on an ongoing basis. And a lot of people take a while to trust you, but also not everyone needs what you have right now. And what you want is that you are top of mind. So the sort of philosophy, forgetting for a minute, where do you publish this, is create original content, focus on helping people learn something or help them make their lives better or be better at their jobs, because that's kind of what they want. And it's not that everybody's watching every word you say, but you start to become kind of a regular thing. And then one day, some portion of your readers say, oh, you know what? Let's hire her, or let's at least call that person, because you've been in front of them. So that's sort of the philosophy. And then
I call that newsletter magic, by the way. Right? When that happens, people assume it's out of the blue, but it's not out of the blue. You just didn't know that they were getting close to their moment of need.
I once read or heard someone say, which I love, that Clients are not on-off switches, they're volume controls.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that it's not like they go from nothing to hiring you. They sort of, I mean, there are some people, but they don't tend to be the best clients anyway. They find out about your newsletter, they hear about you, they start to check you out, they follow you a little bit. And then one day, often years later, they call you up. And I'll tell you, when that person calls you up, says, I've been reading your newsletter for 2 years. And by the way, how's your dog? Because you've been talking about it. The whole trust issue is off the table. They feel like they know you and you've never even heard of them.
Yeah.
It's magic. It really is.
It is. Mm-hmm.
So my approach has been, and back when I started like 20 years ago, all there was email. There's no such thing as blogs, let alone social media. It was just, you could send email to people. So I sent it by email. And then over time, these other things occurred. Like at some point, I don't know, 2005, the blog was invented, which basically meant a non-technical person could post something easily on a website. So then the newsletter was put there as well. So now it's a newsletter, it's an email, posted on the website, it's a blog, same content exactly. I mean, more or less, we can talk about the differences. And then when social media came around, I'm like, great, here's another channel to use. But my philosophy has always been, the email thing that you send, the 600 or 700 or 800 word thing, is sort of the anchor content. And in my approach is that's what I publish. And then I kind of spray it across all these other things. So when LinkedIn finally said, hey, you could publish a newsletter here, I said, great. I take the same content I would put in my email and put it on LinkedIn. So I'm just reaching additional people. But my philosophy has always been write once, publish often. Like the hard part is writing it. Now there's all these other outlets you have, podcasts, whatever. And so it's free, it's easy, why not? So that's my approach has been, and it still is. Every time something new comes out, I check it out, and I try and see if it's worth doing.
And the blurb at the end of your LinkedIn newsletter, which I love, and whenever I share it, people love it, it says, if you are reading this newsletter here, you are reading an abridged version. Plus, you're getting it late. To subscribe to the quote unquote real thing, follow this link. And so I call this like a tardy newsletter, right? Or retarded newsletter, because it's late, right? It's what's
Right.
the time frame? Like how old are the ones you're putting on LinkedIn?
Well, I'm a little bit of an exception to what I do for my own clients. So I publish newsletters for clients. So it's the same approach. The reason I'm an exception is because I've written like 500 newsletters. So I'll reach back to one I wrote 5 years ago and republish it. But for most people who are either starting out or have a smaller amount of content, I'll publish a client's newsletter today and then maybe a week later, publish it on LinkedIn in that tardy way. Mm-hmm. Also, it's abridged. So most of the newsletters I do for clients, it's sort of, I think of it like a magazine. There's a little intro note. Hi, how are you? I can't believe how cold it is. Today we talk about whatever. Then there's this article, again, 600 or 700 words. And then there's usually this sidebar stuff, which adds to the, I think, likability and trust. So even though, I have clients who are like very serious people. I mean, like people consulting into the drug industry or people recruiting or, like really serious stuff. I have to bend their arm a little, but I get them to have a secondary side section that might be like, what I'm reading, here's a book I like, or things that inspire me. I have a client who does that every month. It feels like, what's this got to do with business? And the answer is nothing, but it has everything to do with who they are as people. And so that's how people get a sense more of who they are. But that stuff we don't include. Like the only thing I would put on LinkedIn is the main article. So again, that's why it's abridged and it's a little bit late. So yeah, I'm trying to entice people to sign on to, in my case, my MailChimp newsletter, because I don't want to be at the mercy of LinkedIn. And I think the mistake some people make is, oh, great, LinkedIn offers newsletters. I don't need to do it. I don't need MailChimp anymore. I'll save my $30 a month and great. The problem, though, is, and this is true of every social media service on earth, they have all kinds of rules. So it's unlikely you'll be kicked off of LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram because you did anything bad. But LinkedIn's offered newsletters now, I don't know, 5 years. Well, tomorrow they might say, you know what? We're tired of this. Done. and all your content and all the people who've been with you on LinkedIn who are your subscribers, you have no way to take them with you anywhere else. Whereas email, nobody owns email. There's no one in charge of email. So when you send an email through MailChimp or Constant Contact, that's your list. Again, if I decide I don't like MailChimp anymore, I go over to HubSpot or Constant Contact. I take it with me. You can't do it with the social media services. And so even though I use them as a sort of ancillary thing, I'm not dependent on them in any way. And I think you have to be careful. If you build your house on what is essentially rented land, somebody can change the rules or kick you off, and now you have a real problem. So anyway, that's my view of LinkedIn. Good to use, but you have to be careful.
And so when you have in this blurb to subscribe to the real thing, follow this link, I'm curious how many people actually do that, because I have that too, but truthfully, not all that many people do.
I guess that's a good question. I do ask people when they sign up where they hear about me, and maybe, not a ton. I don't know, maybe 15%. But again, when you think about LinkedIn, and this is a funny thing, most of the people who are my subscribers, I'm already contacts with on LinkedIn. So the people who are likely to see it over there are probably already subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to, sort of pick up the extra people. But I also think it adds just a little. It makes it seem more valuable when I say it that way. I don't really think of it as, it's going to be a big feeder to the newsletter list itself. But I found that, to me, it seemed like a better thing to do than to just simply have a little blurb about who I am, since, of course, it's right there on LinkedIn also. So what's the point there? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, so we're talking now 2 years later after we first talked about this, and LinkedIn is constantly making changes and not really telling anyone about them. And one of the biggest changes lately they're kind of right in the middle of right now, so I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but they're basically, I think, changing creator mode, because it used to be that you had to be in creator mode in order to have the privilege, if you will, of doing a newsletter and some of these other creator content marketing things. But now apparently they're going to be giving the newsletter opportunity or option to everyone. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that and or anything else that's changed in the 2 years related to whether creator mode or the newsletter or how it's working for you.
So I got that email too, whatever it was, like 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was, oh no, they're stopping newsletters, which it turned out they didn't.
Right.
But that was a good example of, oh no,
right.
They changed the rule. So, and I don't know what's going on behind that. For a long time, you didn't have the power to do a newsletter until they said, and no one knows on what basis, right, you're worthy. And I was frankly a little insulted. I'm like, I'm in the newsletter business and I don't have the ability. And then one day, magically, it was on. Now, maybe the point is that since anyone can do it, they said, well, why we have this wall here that everyone can get over? I don't even know. But I think, a couple of things. I don't know that I'd say it's saturated, but since everyone can do it, it sort of loses some of its, coolness, cachet, appeal. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, cachet, much better words. Thank you. The other thing is, I don't want them, again, to control the aspect of how it works. So, for example, it used to be, and theoretically still is, if I sign up for your newsletter, when you publish, I get notified.
Via email or on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm.
Well, I got to tell you, it's so sporadic. I don't know what they're doing because I've got, every single one of my clients, I'm a subscriber to their newsletter, and I get it like here and there once in a while, which again is a perfect example. Nobody knows how their algorithm works, on what basis they decide to tell you. They claim they will tell you, and they're still not telling me. So it's just another example. I don't like that. I like email. I like MailChimp. I control exactly how it happens. And 2 years down the road, I'd say, to me, it's like, hey, why not? And to me, I look at it as, what's the cost benefit here? So it's really easy to do. So I can post my newsletter on LinkedIn and, certainly less than 10 minutes, and puts me in front of everyone I'm first level connected with. So why not?
Hmm.
Whereas, do I want to, I don't know, start some other thing? I'm always looking at, well, how difficult is this to do and how much benefit? The difficulty is so low that I'm like, why not? I should point out while I think of it, LinkedIn has the ability on your own homepage to feature content. And you'd have to look to see like, where do I do it? But so what I do, again, for myself and my clients is the most recent 2 or 3 newsletters are are in the featured content section, which it creates this little block where it takes the image and maybe the first 30 words of that post. And so we always have the most recent 2 or 3, and when we publish a new one, we get rid of the oldest one. So again, it just makes the profile look kind of fresh, and it puts it in front of people who may not have been notified or seen it otherwise in your feed. And again, I could do it in a minute. That's it's so easy once you know how to do it.
So this time saving or quick doing things connects in my mind to AI. And I've been thinking a lot about AI and learning a lot about AI lately. And so I wanted to ask you some questions. Maybe it's related to the newsletter, maybe not. I mean, the AI should be able to just take your newsletter and put it on LinkedIn as a newsletter, don't you think?
Well, it should, and I bet it will.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't believe AI acts in any way in the sort of physical world on your behalf like that.
Right.
Not that
No.
LinkedIn physical, but yeah, it doesn't actually do anything, but it will. Before long, it'll just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this week they're talking a lot about what they're calling AI agents, and
Yeah.
that
Right.
is what is going to happen. But the issue actually that I wanted to ask you about is tone of voice or personality through voice. Because I do think, and I've heard a lot of people say this too, it's not an original idea, that the more people start to use AI, especially for content, the more same old, right? Same, it's going to sound. And therefore, the more, even more important it's going to be for each of us to have our own voice. And you have a very distinctive and funny voice. And I'm sure it's something that perhaps you've worked at over the years, or maybe it's natural to you. But when I talk to people about this, they say, well, how do I even know what my voice is? Or how do I find my voice? So I'm curious what you think about that. What would you say to that?
So totally agree with that. Not that I sort of planned this, but I've always been big on. I mean, not that I planned it in the face of AI coming, but I've always been big on, again, with my clients as well. Serious people, very concerned about their brand and looking unprofessional. And so, for 20 plus years, I spend a lot of time trying to get these very friendly, nice people who, before we get on the call and talk business, talk about their kids or vacation, to like put this stuff in your newsletter. Because I've always thought that, again, AI aside, every financial planner knows the same thing. Every dentist went to dental school. Like, there's nothing really about your professional capabilities or certifications that all your competitors who are worth caring about don't have too. What they don't have is your personality or personal story. So I try and get that in there. I think, to your point, AI is going to make it even more important because AI can already do the, 5 ways to invest for retirement blog as well as you can. What it can't do is say, yesterday my dog threw up, and here's what it's got to do with retirement. Maybe it
And
would.
well, and I just want to call attention to the fact that that is one of your specialties that everybody loves, is how you connect stories of things that happen in your life to marketing in one way or another. And even that, I think, is part of your voice and your style, but not easy to do, right?
It's it's definitely a learned skill. Again, I didn't plan it. I just like that kind of thing, and I find that I pay attention to sort of weird stuff like that. And for whatever reason, I started incorporating into my own writing, and I got a positive response because if I get 5 comments on an email I write, a newsletter I write, 4 of them will be about the story, not
Mm-hmm.
about whatever like the business lesson is. And again, it's a weird thing. It seems like who cares? But that's how people connect. If I sat down with you to have coffee in a Starbucks, just like, hey, let's meet as colleagues, we wouldn't just sit down and talk business. It would be like, can you believe how cold it is? Oh, look at the traffic. That's just what people do.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's a bit of a learned skill, this idea of talk about your dog throwing up and then figure, well, what's this got to do with anything? But
And
what's
what does
interesting?
it?
Well, often nothing. And what I always say is, look, you just need some kind of bridge.
Hmm.
And so what happens, this is what happens to me all the time. I collect these stories. And so the other day I wrote about the fact that I have snow, I had snow on the roof of my car, which you're not supposed to do, but
I saw
I
that
didn't
one.
notice.
Mhm.
I didn't notice
I
because anyway,
didn't notice.
because I've been parking in the garage for so long and I had to park outside. And so I don't think about cleaning my car off. So anyway, I pull out of my office parking lot and all the snow on the roof slides down into the windshield and I suddenly can't see.
Hmm.
And so now I explain. So what happens is, in my case, I go home and I talk to my wife and I go, okay, I got this story. What's this got to do with anything? And
Hmm.
she's like my muse in that way. She'll be like, okay, well, maybe it has to do with pricing. But so I'm just looking for some connection. But what's interesting is when you start a newsletter out by talking about the dog or your snow, the snow or whatever, people like perk up. I think humans are hardwired to pay attention to stories. And so, and also it's
Hmm.
almost like their brain wants to know where it's going to go. And so you have their attention. Now, you can't just tell a story about your dog or it's like, who cares? But when you tie it to some useful business information on the topic that your readers care about, now the whole thing works really well. So yeah, it takes a little while to sort of learn it, but I find with clients that um, to varying degrees, because different people are better at it, they show up sometimes with the story already. Like, oh, I got
Hmm.
this great story. And so again, it's a formula. Not to say it's the only way to do it, but back to your point, it's a way to inject your voice and your who you are into what you're doing because trust is so important. And it's just hard. People can't tell. Like, you don't know how medically capable your doctor is. Like, who knows?
Right.
And the truth is, it probably doesn't really matter. They're all good. The reason you like your doctor and I like mine is because my doctor is funny. She's actually very funny. That's why I like it. Like, I don't know if she's any good or like, I've had the same accountant for 25 years. I don't really know how good she is, frankly.
Mhm.
So
Well, you haven't been
that's the thing.
audited, right?
I have not been audited and I haven't died. So the accountant and the doctor are both good enough.
But let me ask you then, because if one does not have a muse or someone like you or me to say, here's the story, and I want to turn it into a newsletter, do you think AI can help with that?
Um, that's an interesting question. Maybe. I mean, what I end up doing actually when I can't think of something is because I collect my stories. And that's the thing. If you sit down to a blank piece of paper, it's really hard, but I'll collect the story of the snow sliding off the roof or the dog throwing up, even though I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just keep them in one place. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll have like 4 or 5 stories, dog throwing up, snow on the roof, and I like put them on the wall because they're on sticky notes.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, so like on the left side, on the right side, I'll put a bunch of, my stuff. Because, again, I have the same like 20 or 30 ideas, flat fee pricing and, relationship building. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
put like 5 or 6 of those on the other side. And then I just try and draw a line from one to the other to see if I can make a
Mm-hmm.
connection. And again, everyone's got their right side stuff, your 20 or 30 insights about your work and what you do and what you would advise a person. Again, which is why people ostensibly sign up for the newsletter. But then I just try and connect the two. And that's, sort of that's how it works. I find that most people can do that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a key is you got to connect, you got to collect this stuff because they just vanish, the stories and even the insights, you forget them.
I just want to focus on one thing you said and underscore it a little bit because if you have, let's say, 20 main topics or points that you make over and over and over in your 500 plus email newsletters, that flies in the face of the myth or the fantasy that I come across that people use as an obstacle, which is, well, I don't have anything original to say and I don't have anything profound to say. And I can't say the same thing someone else said. And I can't say the same thing I said, last year or 2 years ago. But obviously, you don't believe any of that.
Well, you have to remember a couple things. One is nobody remembers what you wrote in December of 2018. I do have clients sometimes, I have some financial people who are like really good, great memories. And they'll be like, well, I wrote about, fixed cost budgeting in 2018. So I can't do that one again. I'm like, I wrote it and I don't remember what we said last month. But and even your really most of your best interested readers read like every other one again, because a lot of this is just the steady pace of being out there. And the other thing is you're trying to become known for a certain point of view. So yeah, there is some redundancy because again, I've written more than 500 newsletters and I probably have 30 things to say, but that's okay. So, yes, there might be some people who think, and I try not to do over and over again the same thing in order, but there might be people who are like, oh, geez, he's talking about this again, maybe. But it also allows people to be like, boy, she always reminds me of the importance of relationship building or staying in touch with people, or so that's your stuff. There's a reason you see the same Geico ad 500 times. It's like, why do they keep showing it to me? Because you can remember it. So I think that's a non-issue. Mm-hmm. Related to that is people thinking, I don't have anything to say. Right. Who am I to share my insight? But you have to remember the people who potentially would hire you don't know your stuff. They're always at square one. That's what's so great about this. They never get any smarter about whatever it is you do. That's why they hire you. So again, I've had the same accountant for all these years. I don't know anything about accounting. So if she were going to write a newsletter, she has to keep it at Accounting 101. I don't want to know a lot about accounting. All I want is, 500, 600 words on, why you're supposed to track your mileage or whatever. The kind of thing another accountant would be like, well, no kidding. So it has to be super simple. But the great thing is, it's easy for you. In fact, the problem most people have, I find, is they overshoot. They think as if they're writing to a peer and they want to say something original. But again, I don't know. What do you have? 2 original ideas in your profession? Maybe. So it's not an issue. And the great thing about the stories is those you'll never run out of, because today it's your dog and tomorrow it's the snow. And so the stories change. The insight, again, I don't reuse the same words, but I bet if I compared 5 newsletters I wrote about pricing, they'd all be very similar. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'd say, yes, don't even worry about that.
And I think also the other point I would make is people love being reminded of what they already know. It's not like your goal is to tell them something they don't already know.
I think that's a good point. Right. They feel good that they like, oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if you had a personal trainer, they're going to tell you 1,000 times, like, keep your back straight when you're doing push-ups. It's not like, oh, I told the guy once, I'm not telling him again.
Exactly. All right. I think we're going to have to wrap up, although I do feel like we could just go on for a while here. But 2 questions. One is I always ask for baby steps. So based on what we have been talking about, maybe you can come up with a baby step. But before you do, I think I'm going to start asking everyone this question for as long as I need to, which is, are you afraid of AI and that it will replace you in any way?
I'm not afraid at all because I'm too close to the end for it to really hurt me, frankly. So, there's no worse that could happen to me at this point. However, even if I were, 30 years ago or whatever, I don't think you need to be the first one to use it, but I don't think you want to be the last one to use it. Meaning some people are dismissing it still, saying, oh, it'll never replace real writers or, whatever. And that might be true. But I think, to me, it's like, just try and pay attention to it, play around with it. It's very reminiscent to me of the internet, 25 years ago, where there were people who were like, no, not using it. Mm-hmm. Or I'm printing out all my emails, and, and I think that there was somewhat of a disadvantage. So anyway, I would say just on AI too, that the stuff that's going to change in the world, nobody has any idea what it is. Like everyone's sort of thinking, how will it sort of move the needle on what we already do? But, when the internet came out, everyone thought it's going to mean 400 channels of TV. Like nobody thought there'd be overnight delivery and online dating and Uber. And I think AI is the same thing. Right now, it's like, it's going to change. People are going to make fake videos, whatever. And maybe they will. But I think it's just going to change the world in ways no one's thought of. That's my thinking on it.
And I guess I'm curious also, are you asking or do you have a sense whether your clients are using it like oh, you know what? Maybe I don't have to get Michael to write this newsletter, or maybe next year I'm just going to have ChatGPT do it for us. Is any of that happening?
Well, I think that's a realistic concern for people. So a few thoughts on that. One is, I absolutely think they're looking at it because, hey, if you can save whatever you're paying me every month and do it yourself, why not? I do think um, this is my strategy back like when I had a job like 30 years, 25 years ago. My strategy from getting laid off was I'm going to be involved in as many different things as possible in the company because I'd been in enough meetings as a manager when the layoffs happened to know that the way you laid people off was who could we cleanly cut out.
Mm.
And so I deliberately got my hands in a lot of stuff so that it would be difficult to get rid of me.
Hmm.
And I have the sort of same philosophy with clients, which is I don't just write for them. I take care of all the technology back end. I advise them on marketing. I do all this other social media, LinkedIn stuff. So theoretically, you could get some link AI thing to get rid of me, but they're not just buying words. And so, from my client's perspective, anyway, to get rid of me and have your newsletter continue to do what it's doing, at least at this point, would be really hard to do. So I think that's interesting. If I were just being paid to like give me 800 words on financial planning this month, that seems a lot easier to replace than all this other stuff. So my advice to people is try and get involved in many aspects of your client's business because that's the decision they're going to try and make. How do we get rid of him? And can't blame them.
No, and I think a part of that is also something I'm hearing and thinking a lot about, which is because I can imagine people listening to you saying, well, what else could we get involved in then? And I think the answer, or one answer, is strategy and messaging and voice, right? What we were talking about before, because AI is not going to be able to bring your voice into it yet, maybe. I don't know if you train it, if you have your own chat GPT. I know that is a thing already, but the idea of strategy, I think, also is worth exploring as an opportunity.
I totally agree. And I think people are intimidated because they think, well, I don't really know about strategy, right. But you do. You know how to communicate well. And I see it with every single client that, again, these are really smart, very successful people. But they'll send me something and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it's too many words and it's redundant and it's like, it doesn't make a ton of sense. But I've realized that when it comes to communication, it's not correlated with intelligence in any way.
Mm.
And so I'm not shocked anymore. I used to be. I'd be like, oh, I had some clients and still do who are just like brilliant. What I love is, but when it comes to writing, I'm like, are you kidding me? But that's good because
mm-hmm.
they need that. And when you help them not just figure out what the word should be, but is this a good idea to begin with? Or like, how does this fit with your website? So it's bigger than words. It's the whole communication thing. And not only are they never going to get good at it, they don't really want to get good at it. Like they got other things to do. So AI, I think, is going to get rid of some stuff without question. And really, nobody knows which. The other thing, while I think of it, is can you be the person who helps them understand how AI could be used?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, at least for now, right? That's where the help is required. That's where the white space is. That's where, if I were saying, and I often do, listen to the market, right? Ask them what they're doing or thinking of doing and just offer to help.
Right, because they still have jobs, and they're trying to keep the wheels turning. So for them to figure some of this stuff out, it's really hard to do.
Yeah,
and I don't think you have to be way out in front of them either.
No,
just
agreed.
A little bit ahead.
Just a few baby steps. Speaking of baby steps, what is a baby step that, based on everything we've said, someone might take in the direction of what we're talking about?
So I bet this is the same thing I said 2 years ago, which is you need to push send. Like you need to publish the content. And people are, again, I see this all the time with new clients. People are really afraid of what people are going to think and how am I going to look and, blah, blah, blah. But it's what I found is that if people like your stuff, you get some traction and some nice feedback. If they don't, they just ignore you. And
Right.
nobody ever comes back and says, that was the worst thing I ever read. They just ignore you. And so what happens is, which means the cost of not doing it well is zero, unless you don't do it at all because you wait too long and you're like, I'm not ready yet, and blah, blah, blah. It's just like your 10th newsletter will be better than your first, but you have to write 9 others to get to 10. So you just got to keep doing it.
Excellent. All right, Michael. So where can people find out about the penguins?
At the zoo. At michaelkatz.com.
What?
Katz.
Where are the penguins?
Well, you could go to Blue Penguin Development, but that's a lot to remember and type. So I also have my own name. They all go to the same place. Either one.
So you own michaelkatz.com?
Let me just tell you, I bought that in 1999.
Wow.
And I told everyone I knew, buy your own name.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't listen. And I bet once a year I'll hear from some other Michael Katz who wants to buy it.
Uh-huh.
And I just go, sorry, I'm keeping that one. But anyway, yes, I own my own name.
All right. So they can find your newsletter, which is also, it doubles as a podcast, by the way, which I love. And they can sign up for that there and find out more about what you do.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. And maybe I won't wait until someone requests you to bring you back.
Imagine. How great would that be?
All right. We will talk again soon, no doubt.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Michael's baby step is a simple one. Push send. Don't wait to feel ready, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, or for your newsletter, whether on LinkedIn or via email, to be perfect, or any of those other obstacles Michael and I both see people putting in their own way. So if you want to build a thriving business on your own terms, the first step is to sign up for my quick tips at marketing-mentortips.com. Once you're on the site, you'll find lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.